Hi everyone, it is Maundy Thursday and I'm reading in John chapter 18 beginning at verse 28. What has happened so far where we have left Jesus. He was arrested. He was of course betrayed. The high priest Annas has questioned Jesus. Now Caiaphas has questioned Jesus. Peter has denied him 3 times. And let's pick it up at verse 28 in chapter 18. Then the Jewish leaders took Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. By now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanness, they did not enter the palace because they wanted to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate came out to them and asked, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" "If he were not a criminal," they replied, "we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said, "Take him yourselves and judge him by your own law." "But we have no right to execute anyone," they objected. This took place to fulfill what Jesus had said about the kind of death he was going to die. Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Is that your own idea?" Jesus asked, "or did others talk to you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied. "Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it you have done?" Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place." "You are a king then," said Pilate. Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into this world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." "What is truth?" retorted Pilate. With this he went out again to the Jews gathered there and said, "I find no basis for a charge against him. But it is your custom for me to release to you one prisoner at the time of the Passover. Do you want me to release the King of the Jews?" They shouted back, "No, not him. Give us Barabbas." Now Barabbas had taken part in an uprising. All right, so this is the day when Jesus was sentenced, when he was executed, he died, and then he was buried. It was on our what we call Good Friday, and it's early in the morning. So the Jewish leaders have taken Jesus now to the home of Pilate, the Roman governor. And so they bring him to him, and Pilate comes out and he says, "What charges are you bringing?" He had to know, what's the charge here? What are you accusing this man of? Matthew chapter 27 verse 18 tells us that Pilate knew that they had brought Jesus to him out of envy. And he knew that there was something, they wanted to get rid of him. It wasn't because he had done anything wrong. And so he gives them opportunity to say, you know, what are the charges? And they're just coming back, well, if he were a criminal, what would we bring him to you for? The charges for 3 times. Now I have it here, and once in this chapter, verse 38, he says, "I find no basis for a charge against him." He examined him, he talked to him. Again in chapter 19, there's a couple of other times in verses 4 and 6. We didn't read it, but he said the same thing. "I find no basis for any fault in him. There's no charge that can come against him." He said to them in verse 31, "Take him for yourselves and judge him by your own law." That's what Pilate wanted to do. He didn't want anything to do with them. But they said, excuse me, correctly, "We can't execute him." Now, the Jewish way of killing a person would be stoning, but they didn't want that. They wanted him to be crucified. And I'm going to read to you why, because I think it would be helpful for us to know this. In Deuteronomy chapter 21, this is why they wanted him to be crucified. Deuteronomy 21, verse 22. "If someone guilty of a capital offense is put to death and their body is exposed on a pole, you must not leave the body hanging on the pole overnight. Be sure to bury it that same day, because anyone who is hung on a pole is under God's curse." So they believed that, and they believed that anyone who was hung or crucified would be under God's curse. So they wanted to, so with Jesus having to be crucified, that would mean to them and to everyone else that Jesus was under the curse of God. And so his messianic claims to who he was, to be the Messiah, would be discredited. So anyway, so that's kind of why they wanted him to be crucified. So Pilate is, I think, a little puzzled about this whole thing. What's going on here? So he goes out to Jesus and he says, "Are you the King of the Jews? Is that who you are?" And then Jesus doesn't give him a direct answer. I think Pilate's probably very used to someone, when he asks someone a question, they're going to give him the answer. They're not going to say anything else. And I think he's just kind of taken back with Jesus's response. I think it probably irritated him a little bit. And Jesus said to him, "Is that your own idea, or did others talk to you about me?" I think he's basically saying, are you thinking that I'm a king to upset the political system here, or do you understand that I'm a king of the Jews? That this is my kingdom is not from here. My kingdom is not for here. So Jesus has a little discussion then with him. He tells him very plainly, my kingdom is not from here. He says, if it were, you would see my servants would fight. There would be no battle here. Anyway, so then Jesus comes to this conversation about truth. And when you hear this, Jesus says, "Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." And then it says, Pilate, in verse 38, Pilate retorts, "What is truth?" And it's really kind of hard to interpret. Like, what was he saying? Was he being scornful? Was he being facetious? Was he being impatient? Or was he being sincere? Was he sincerely asking, what is truth? Now, maybe you have your own idea on that and what was happening here. But at the end of it, at the end of that question, Pilate again says, "I find no basis for a charge against him. I find no basis. I find no fault in him." So the rest of this, I'm just going to leave it right there today. I encourage you to read on in chapter 19. Read of how he was sentenced to be crucified, how he was crucified, the death of him, and then, of course, leads up to the burial and the empty tomb, and how he appeared, first of all, to the women, to Mary Magdalene. It's a wonderful story. It is truth. It is the word of God. So I encourage you in this day to, as we come to Good Friday, one more day, just to spend time with him and listen to what he has in his word. May the Lord bless you.